Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Holistic Health Podcast. Kicking off today's conversation with some chat GPT slash me. It's a bit of a combo effort here. Three just random fun questions. I'm just enjoying doing this. I hope everyone listening isn't mind playing along at home. My first question is if you could choose whether you, and you have to choose one of them, whether you know how you're going to die or when you're going to die, and you can't alter the fate of either of them, what would you choose?
This is a very morbid way
I'm
to
like
answer.
straight away know my answer
Well, no,
for
I do too. I do too. Mine's definitely time of death
yeah.
because I feel like that would make me really focus on getting all the, like doing all the things I want to do. It would be really motivating to me. Whereas if I knew how, I'd probably just develop so much anxiety around that and waste my life worrying until it actually happened.
Yeah, surely everyone would choose that option. If you choose a different option, can you please DM me? It's Nat
Yes.
speaking in case you still can't tell the difference between Amy and my voice, but I'm really curious as to if anyone would actually choose the how, because I agree with you. I think that it would just make you live in this perpetual state of anxiety, particularly because there's so many different ways that you could die. Like, what if it was a car crash? Then every time you drive, you'd
Oh,
be worried.
yeah, it would
Or
ruin your
if it
quality.
was, or for me, if it was like a shark attack, every time I go, I mean, to be fair, every time I go in the ocean, I do definitely think about sharks. But I think I would think more about it, you know?
Mm,
So anyway, interesting. Okay,
mm,
my next question is, do you prefer adventure or comfort?
mm,
And
mm,
if you want to define what those mean for you, you can as well in your answer because obviously it's a little bit broad.
mm. I don't know. I feel like my first thought is comfort, which is so boring. I know it's probably not the right answer. And I do love new experiences and adventure, but I'm gonna just put this down to my tendency towards anxiety. Like,
Mm,
there's not very much that can hurt you when you're cuddled up on the couch under a blanket with a cup of tea watching a movie.
yeah, yep. I think that's fair. I do think that's fair. My answer is adventure, but part of the reason is actually because I think I both enjoy it. I mean, I feel challenged anxiety wise in
Mm,
adventure,
mm,
but I also feel like that benefit of self confidence that I get on the
mm,
other side of it, and then how much I fucking enjoy the comfort at the other
mm,
end.
mm,
I feel like it almost makes me enjoy the comfort more.
mm,
So mine's probably like some boring one in between. I'm not an adventure junkie where I'm like, just give all of it to me all of the time
mm,
and I thrive off it. I feel really intimidated by it at times.
mm,
But I think I really enjoy the feeling afterwards and what it gives me. I think that's my answer currently.
mm.
That might change soon.
Yeah, I really admire that about you, actually. Like, I'm in awe of situations that you've chosen to put yourself in that are incredibly terrifying for you and just how much you push through that. And when I grow up, I'd like to be more like you.
Oh my gosh. Look, I don't do it gracefully if that makes you feel any better, which is interesting. Um, and then my last question is if you could experience one day as someone else, who would it
Mm,
be and why? And it could
mm,
be generic, as in you don't
mm,
have to pick a specific individual that you can name unless you want to. It could just be
mm,
like, I don't know, an astronaut or a
mm,
whatever. What would you choose?
mm. That's a funny example you gave because I was actually on track to be an astronaut before I decided to become a naturopath. But
Oh my
actually,
God.
yeah, I know. But would I want to try? I mean, really, there's not a lot of activity happening out there, to be honest. So that probably it probably wouldn't be that exciting. I feel really torn between two options. We when we played this game and said what superpower would you like? For me, it was like understanding and speaking all languages, including animals. So the first thing that popped into my mind was like an animal psychic slash communicator slash whisperer, because I just think that would be so lovely to experience directly firsthand what that's like, connecting with an animal telepathically and being able to communicate. But also the what book was I reading? I grew up like reading spy books. And there was like a time where I used to write and code, and like, I don't know, there's like this adrenaline junkie, private investigatory, like, really curious about the underpinnings of society. And I almost wonder, like, high, like top military, top political, like someone who's actually in a position of having to make real world scary decisions, just because I'm nosy. Like, I'm just really curious to see what really goes on underneath the society that we all kind of live in.
Yeah, I love that. That's so much more interesting than my answer.
Oh, no, come
Mine,
on. What's yours?
I'm still going to go with my gut instinct of what I first came up with,
Oh,
rather than a thought out response, is I would be a performer, as in singing and dancing to a big crowd, because I've always wanted to experience what it feels like to do that while having actual talent. Like, I used to do drama and like participate in like talent quests, but I'm not a good dancer. I'm not a good singer. So I didn't like, I would do it and I'd enjoy it, but I'd also be aware that like I wasn't amazing. But I feel like it'd just take my little Leo heart to a whole new level if I could just put on an amazing performance with other people as well, but I'm like the main star.
oh,
Like, I have
oh.
backup dancers. and,
Yeah.
and have everyone give me a standing ovation.
Thundering applause, endless, embarrassingly long applause. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that would be an
So
amazing feeling.
if anyone can magically grant me that gift, that would be, I'll take it.
I love that. I do understand that. Absolutely. That sounds so fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, on to less exciting endeavors, more, more practical related,
Yeah.
is the conversation around, yeah, I guess how to approach the whole moving towards organic based produce or food, especially because it's not necessarily accessible to everyone for various reasons.
Mm,
And I think that it can be tempting to think that, well, if I can't do it properly, then I'm not going to bother at all. But I think that it's really important to be aware of some of the things that you can do, and maybe a way that we encourage our clients to approach this, which is really not black and white. Like, both of us are quite practical and meet people where they're at. And look, I'm sure that both of us at various times in our lives have also, and maybe still do, practice some of these approaches, as well. So do you want to kick us off with where you encourage people to start when we're
mm.
talking about this topic?
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to preface what I'm going to say with a bit of preamble. And I don't think we have an audience who think this way, but there's a whole other group of humans. I call them your mum's a chemical group. And these are the people who are ignorant of how impactful endocrine disrupting chemicals and other, toxins, inflammagens, obesogens that are in our personal care products. And really, I think it's just cognitive dissonance. They just want to be able to live their lives and not actually take responsibility for their health. And so they kind of write off chemicals as something to not be concerned about, which is very unfortunate for them. But one of the arguments I've seen, even around saying, organic's a waste of time because it still uses chemicals, people conflate chemicals with molecules. And there is a fundamental difference there. Like, all chemicals have a molecular structure, but not all molecules are actually classed as chemicals. And not all chemicals are problematic either, by the way. But this is a bit of an all or nothing thinking again, where they're like, oh, it's an absolute waste of time. I've also heard arguments about, organic food, yes, it might still use chemicals as in molecules, but also the potential for spray drift from neighboring farms. Sometimes there may be a little bit of contamination, but this is the same attitude of, oh, I've eaten one Tim Tam, may as well eat the whole bucket. Or it's like very all or nothing, black and white. I don't want to know. I'm going to bury my head in the sand. I'm going to pretend that I'm too smart for this, but I actually don't have the intelligence to understand the depth and breadth of the subject and also the nuance. And what I will say is every choice you make matters. And, I went through a stage, which I think all natural health practitioners do, when you first learn this information and you're going through pathophysiology and you're looking at this on a biochemistry level, you go, and this is true for me anyway, I tried to be a purist and do absolutely everything right. And that's unhealthy in itself, quite frankly. The stress that causes is problematic in itself. So I really think there is a nice balance. What that looks like for you might change from season to season as well, based on many different things. But every choice matters, and every reduction in exposure reduces your body burden, reduces potential for DNA damage, toxic load, tissue damage, endocrine-driven diseases, conditions, including cancer. And so every choice that you make that's just slightly better, even if it's not perfect and it's not across the board, absolutely helps and makes a difference. And, we can all agree, like, smoking is bad for you, but someone who smokes 1 or 2 cigarettes on the weekend isn't experiencing the same impact as someone who smokes 10 to 20 cigarettes a day. So really what we're looking at is what options here are something you can do consistently or easily or cheaply, or you've been able to access in your local environment, where you are right now with what you have. And also these are other things, if they're not available to you right now, something you could consider as the next step. Like, we're all on a journey to, knowing ourselves, making better choices as we go. And as long as we're heading in the right direction, that's really, I think, all that matters. So all of that to say is, if we could wave a magic wand and everyone ate organic everything, that would be ideal, wouldn't it? For many reasons, the agricultural industry, farming, food suppliers, food producers are using chemicals. Sometimes it has to do with yield. It's also less labor intensive to just use chemicals to do a job that you might otherwise manually have to do. When you're producing large quantities, certainly from a profitability point of view. And I do honestly think many farmers don't understand, it's a little bit like the pharmaceutical industry, like that. Given the marketing brochure, they're sold a spiel, they are misled to believe it's harmless or it only infects insects. But actually, when you look at the literature, that's not the truth. So I think it's a combination of ignorance, impracticality, lots of reasons. And sadly, that's just how our food industry has evolved. And I suppose one of the things that I'm proud of being able to do is every time I purchase organic, I am financially supporting an industry that I'm, trying to grow and develop. And I look forward to the day, I hope and pray for a future where organic is the mainstream and the norm. But for now, the power is with the people. We vote with our dollar, and we absolutely can make choices that are better for ourselves. So what I would say is, if you can't afford everything organic, but you can maybe afford to get some things organic and some things not, I personally have a list of things that I prioritize over the others. So first and foremost, chicken and eggs, especially battery cage eggs, and chickens. I would never consume those either, but those are pumped full of antibiotic growth promotants, which are endocrine disrupting chemicals disguised as antibiotics. Of course, you're ingesting the antibiotic element too, which affects your microbiome. So chicken and eggs are something I would never eat non-organic. Like if I'm out at a cafe or at a restaurant, for example, I won't order the chicken unless it's organic. The other thing is things that are really heavily sprayed, like berries, for example. Berries are also not something you can wash off. You can't give it a scrub. You're not peeling the skin off. They're really something that you're, in terms of volume, onboarding a fair bit. And also leafy greens, again, just high surface area and a fragile structure that you can't necessarily clean other than a little bit of a soak. So that are my probably top things to prioritize in my grocery shop, if you like. Nat, do you have any others that you would consider that are non-negotiables for you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say mine are very similar to yours. I just, in a very general sense, I'll either look up the Dirty Dozen Clean 15 if I'm in a situation where I'm not near the farmer's market that I usually use or don't have access to organic produce. And if you don't have access to that list, the other thing that I just generally go off is I think, well, the thinner the skin, the higher the amount of pesticide is that's likely to be used on it. And then because it needs more protection versus something like a banana where it has thick skin, and so there's going to be less that permeated through into the actual food. I'd also say that coffee like is something where
Oh, yeah.
whether it's decaf or regular, I I won't say always because I go to cafes occasionally, and I mean I'll try and opt for one that has an organic mix, but I certainly don't use it as a like I will still get one if it's not because I don't do it super regularly. But in terms of what I'm using at home, I definitely prioritize organic because again, like it has a large surface area, and I think that you're then soaking. I mean, I use coffee, like plunger coffee, so I'm then soaking that in water, allowing all of that to stew and then drinking it. So that's just something for me. But if you're not someone who drinks coffee, obviously it doesn't matter. And like similar with things that I'm consuming regularly is the other lens that I look at it through in terms of what am I having most of the time.
Oh, great. Yeah, really, I totally agree with all of that. I think that's really, really clever. Another thing is to focus on things that we know have less of a body burden. So, for example, opting for grass-fed beef and something that hasn't been grain finished is going to have a lower pesticide residue or chemical residue. Lamb, for instance, is always grass-fed, so that's another really great option. And also, like wild caught fish, you can get some tinned fish like wild caught Alaskan salmon, and that also is going to be lower. It's not strictly pesticide related, although there are pesticides, PCBs, and dioxins in the ocean which contaminate fish. But further to that, heavy metals, antibiotics, food colorants, and farmed fish. I would just never eat farmed fish. So you can absolutely make higher quality choices without even considering like what it's been sort of treated or sprayed with by using that framework. That being said, there are also other options that you might not have considered.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I would say is really trying to opt for like spray free or low spray options. So organic being the gold standard, but again, like sometimes access or affordability really is a problem in that regard. And I would say, look, even for me, having a husband that eats like outrageous amounts of food, it's not financially viable for us to buy organic everything. And so for us, I'll buy organic some things, and then the other thing that I primarily do is I actually go to the farmer's market and I just look for there's a particular company, brand, whatever that I use at my local farmers market that do spray-free produce. Now, the thing to know about spray-free versus organic, and this I'm talking in the context of Australia. I don't know if it's the same everywhere. I imagine that it's similar, but this is what I'm speaking to at the moment. So organic is certified, so they go through like they have to adhere to strict standards in order to earn that certification as organic. Whereas and within that, it means like they can't use synthetic sprays, they can't use synthetic fertilizers, they can't use genetically modified things, they can't use they have to use soil and ecosystem like I guess structures where they're not using any pesticides or herbicides in the actual soil management. Whereas when it comes to spray free, it's not a regulated term. So anyone, relatively speaking, can use the label spray free because no one's overseeing what that actually means. Generally speaking, the implication of what it means is that there's no kind of synthetic herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, etc. that are used on the actual crop. They may or may not still use synthetic fertilizers, etc., in the actual management of the soil that the crops are grown in. And there's no testing or any kind of auditing process to ensure that they're adhering to it. So I guess in that regard, it's a bit of a trust-based operation in terms of you're taking their word for it. My encouragement and experience is that like having a conversation with the farmer or the people there. And I don't know, I feel like I've got a pretty good BS meter in terms of if I feel like someone's just saying words and doesn't really know what they're talking about or trying to escape the conversation, then it's pretty easy to see through perhaps that what they're saying is not completely true or you need to gather more information. But I feel like if you're having the conversation, you're asking those questions, my experience is that not everyone, but like the majority of people who are farmers that are at farmers markets that are selling produce as spray free, are doing it because they can't afford to go through the certification program to call it organic. That's not always true. So again, you have to, I guess it is a bit of a quote unquote risk in that you are making a decision based on trust rather than strict adherence. But I also think at the end of the day, you just have to do what you can and what's accessible to you. So I'm personally comfortable with taking that risk to an extent.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like having a conversation with the farmer or the stallholder or supplier about what they actually do is important. I've definitely come across farmers that are basically everything would meet the certification requirements for organic, but they just can't afford to do it. And then others are using low spray or like less problematic sprays. And what I've found to be true so far is that they're really passionate about health and they're really forthcoming about what they are actually using it and why, or, the limitations that they've found with their particular farm. And when they are really upfront like that and eager to tell you, even though they know it's not like the perfect gold standard, that for me gives me confidence that it's still a much better choice than something that has just been commercially produced using standard pesticide and farming management techniques. So yeah, really good guidance on that. And then a couple of other things you could also consider is, if you're buying organic from the supermarket, it is obviously quite a bit, well, not always, but often it's a lot more expensive than the non-organic options. Sometimes there's a bit of a middle ground where you might find grass-fed or, free range that's perhaps better than, battery cages or things like that. Just make the best choice that you can afford. But another way that you may be able to make organic food more accessible is going direct to farmers and suppliers for a start, and maybe your local farmers market is enough, but forming a bit of a co-op with friends and family. So often there you can get a bit of a discount for volume when you're placing orders in bulk. And if you've got, you know, a great little neighborhood community, or you've got friends and family in the local area, and you all have those similar values, you can pull together resources to do a weekly or a fortnightly or if it's meat, maybe a monthly shop, and freeze things and actually really bring the cost down a fair bit. I've definitely seen families, you know, buy a whole pig or a whole cow and have it butchered, and it's just like per kilo so much cheaper than what you can get in the supermarket. So consider that. And then you've also got the option, which I've had very mixed success with, but is grow your own. If you have a green thumb, grow your own. You can't necessarily grow your own cow unless you've got a lot of land, but you might have enough space for goats, or maybe you've got space for a chicken or two. And if it's not, you know, animal-based stuff, even just fruit and veg, most people could create a bit of a herb garden, if you like, in, you know, a couple of pots or in a small planter box. Or one thing that we have done before is done that with rocket and iceberg lettuce, and also cherry tomatoes. For some reason where I live, they grow really well. And we don't really have a backyard. We've got like this kind of dodgy courtyard, but we've got like a couple of planter boxes on the back deck, and then we've got like a bigger one down the bottom, which has got this jungle of a cherry tomato plant in it. And it means, you know, we're in complete control of what's done to that plant. We've used, you can look this up, but there's like companion planting where certain herbs keep pests away to protect the other plants. There's also copper tape you can use. It's like, if you imagine like a really thick bougie like roll of tape that's made out of copper, you can actually stick that round the planter box, and it deters snails and other pests and stop them even climbing into the planter box. You never have to think about it. You know, certain other things like clove and cinnamon powder will kill pests, and it can be done very cheaply, very easily. Obviously, it requires a bit of time and effort. You have to have a desire to tend to your garden, the time, the energy, enough space, but you could even have just a few bits of rocket and lettuce on your kitchen bench if you wanted to. So that's just another way that you can incorporate, or, you know, crowd out some of those things that you would otherwise be buying from a supermarket that were heavily sprayed. So, you know, those are the things that we would sort of suggest to try and incorporate some organic or lesser pesticide residue items in your diet. But also the other option that we are going to touch on now is the fact that you can also reduce the pesticide residue by good cleaning and scrubbing or peeling of the items that you've purchased. Now, again, Nat mentioned the Dirty Dozen list. That's a US based list. I've always wondered whether it's the same here in Australia. I imagine it's pretty similar, but if you were just to focus on those things that are on the Dirty Dozen list, meaning they are the ones with the highest pesticide exposure, washing and cleaning them really well is a really great option, because it will reduce just how much you're ingesting from that point. And there's lots of different methods you can use. And also there's products, although you don't necessarily have to use products or specific items, but even if you just give it a good rinse and scrub, that can be really helpful, can't it, Nat?
Yeah, so yeah, as you said, there are different options, and look, you can run it underwater and just like physically scrub it with a scrubbing brush to remove some of that surface dirt or residue, which you will help to an extent. I think that as far as other options go, I mean, there's so many. You could do like a salt water soak where you just mix a couple of teaspoons of salt with water and just allow it to actually soak for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then just rinse it off and let it dry, and then pop it away in wherever you're going to put it. You can also do like a vinegar soak where usually you do about 1 part vinegar to 3 parts water, and exactly the same as the process with the salt water soak. I think you can also use like baking soda, and that could also work. I've only really done the salt and the vinegar one. I haven't done the baking soda one specifically. There's also products around. So, one of the ones that I recommend is the brand Koala Eco. It has a fruit and veg wash, where again, you just fill up your sink with cold water, and then you just put, a few pumps of the actual fruit and veg wash into it, and let it soak, and then just obviously rinse it, scrub whatever you need to scrub if you needed to scrub anything, otherwise just allow it to soak, and then you just allow it to dry off, and then again pop it away. And it's quite an affordable option as well, so it's not something that's like outrageously expensive. So you can choose your option based on what you have access to, your budget, and whether or not you want something where it's just a couple of pumps and you're done, or whether or not you want to have to kind of DIY it a little bit more. But I think it's a good habit to get into, particularly if you are not consistently buying organic produce. It just makes it easy if you're already in the habit of doing that.
Yeah, just on that note, if you are using anything to soak it in, whether it's baking soda, vinegar, or salt, just make sure you rinse it afterwards and allow it to dry properly before you store it. Salt, as Nat mentioned, can loosen like surface residues. Apple cider vinegar, or any kind of vinegar, is particularly useful for dissolving waxy coatings, and you'd be really surprised just how many like foods are sprayed with wax to make it look shiny. For example, apples are sprayed with wax, often up to 3 times, to make them look shiny. So I would certainly, for any kind of shiny produce, especially where you're eating the skin, suggest the vinegar is the best option. And it was interesting, in lab studies, baking soda removed more pesticide residue than just plain water, and it's roughly a teaspoon of baking soda to 2 cups of water. So again, like really, really cheap to be able to do it. But interestingly, where it was possible to scrub, so apples, potatoes, maybe citrus. I probably wouldn't bother with citrus because you're not eating the skin anyway, but scrubbing actually removed more than any soaks combined, and that's obviously a surface. If you can scrub it, you can't scrub a broccoli floret, so this isn't going to apply. So where you can, giving it a bit of a scrub is definitely also a good idea. And from there, you could also consider just removing those outer layers. So again, if you're having a banana, peel the skin. Citrus, you're not eating the skin anyway. If it's, say, a cabbage, you could just peel off a few of those outer leaves, which are going to have the most heavy pesticide residues, leaving what's inside less impacted. That being said, if you do want a nice wash, I know you've got a favorite that you have used and recommended.
Yeah, it's the one that the main one, as I mentioned before, is just the Koala Eco one. Though there was another brand that is escaping me at the moment, but if I think of it, I'll put it in the show notes. But that one I have just found, all my clients who have opted to use it have found it works really well. But again, like, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily outrageously better than the DIY options, to be fair. I think it's more just a matter of like convenience. To be honest.
The last thing I'll say is something I've recently been experimenting with is using ozone. I found a really very well priced ozone machine online. Was it from Harvey Norman or Dick Smith? I can double check, but basically it was $60. And we've been using it for a few different things actually. I've been ozonating water to drink, I've been ozonating water for sinus rinses, but I've also been like bubbling like blueberries, for instance. And what this is probably just a little bit of a step up from like a produce wash, if you like, but there are some studies that show this has been really helpful. But number one, you can't, ozone gas is a problem. So it's not like you can kind of set it up in the kitchen and then hover around doing stuff while it's going. So that's a little inconvenient. You've either got to leave the kitchen or set it up somewhere away from what the air that you're breathing. But what I will also say is that it kills microbes. It's antimicrobial, ozone. And there is a lot of talk around how the microbes themselves are the things that contribute to produce breaking down a lot quicker, which makes sense because they're consuming the food. I ozonated these blueberries. Can't even say I actually dried them off all that well, but I tipped them into a storage container with a paper towel to absorb, residual moisture. And 2 weeks later, they were still plump, crisp, tart, in this kind of, it was like maybe 2 punnets worth, I think. There was maybe like 5, 6 berries that were maybe a little bit soft. I couldn't believe how much fresher they were. And for me, one of the things that pisses me off is just how quickly stuff goes off in the fridge. You might use Rocket for salad one night and then 2 nights later it's a slimy mess in the back of the fridge. And I just thought this was obviously moisture is a problem, so drying it is an important part of the process, but it was so incredible to see how much fresher they were, and how much longer they lasted. So yeah, ultimately what we're saying is, yes, organic is best. It's the gold standard, but you might not even be able just to source that or even have it shipped to where you are. So do what you can with what you have according to what you can afford. And then there are all these other options that you can take advantage of, in the event that the food's not organic.
Yeah, I feel like there's so many options, and as we've said, like every step is still a step in the right direction of helping to reduce your exposure to pesticides, to herbicides, to fungicides, etc. And I think the more you do that, the more it makes a difference over the long term as well. Plus, it also tastes better, in my opinion. I know that's a really
Yeah,
privileged thing to say, but
it
it
does.
really does taste better. And I think if you're aware of that and you notice the difference, like you are more likely to eat things that taste better, generally speaking. So, yeah, I think it's something that is certainly worth considering, but just take any guilt or pressure out of the process. Whatever you can do is still a step in the right direction. And even those of us who know all of the things still sometimes need to take the quote unquote next best option that's available rather than the gold standard. So yeah, I think go forth and find some whatever spray free or low residue produce you can find. And I guess we will be back in your ear holes again next week.
Can't wait. See you then, friends. Bye.